They need China, and yet they hate China and fear China at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of odd right now. So Europe should get closer to China. India should get closer to China. I mean, when you look at who's threatening Europe, for instance, it's the United States. You know, I'm American, but I'm embarrassed that Trump is trying to take Greenland from Denmark. So, you know, you look at what Trump is doing with the trade war against all of the European nations. You see what he's talking about with Greenland. He is more of an existential threat to the Europeans. So what should countries be doing? You look at a country like Germany, right? Their biggest market is China. You see BASF invested about $7 billion in China to build up chemical plants, and the Chinese government opened up their welcome mat for the Germans. You know, the Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, their largest markets in the world is actually China. So it doesn't make sense that the politicians like a Merz in Germany are criticizing China, like Keir Starmer is criticizing China when he was the PM. But the business community is taking a much more pragmatic outlook. When I talk with European businessmen, they find that their politicians are downright crazy and that they should be getting closer to China right now because they need the economic growth. You got to remember, China is the world's largest retail market. GDP growth in China will count for about a third of the world's GDP growth in 2026. So when a lot of economists talk about, let's go to Thailand, let's go to Vietnam, those are going to be major new engines for growth. Well, actually, China's GDP growth in 2026 alone is larger than Thailand's and Vietnam's economy combined. So you have to look at scale. If European countries don't want to fall into an economic morass, then they need to rely on China's growth as a growth engine.
But the Australian paradox is perhaps even more extreme. Australia depends on Chinese trade, yet is willfully forming a part of an anti-China ring and the rhetoric of its politicians. I mean, if I was running China, I'd tell them to go and take a run and jump myself. If you feel that way, we'll stop buying your stuff. But they're completely dependent on China purchasing their stuff, and yet they are openly in league with Trump against China.
Yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's insane. I think with Australia's case, China is their largest trade partner. It's China that's buying all of Australia's iron ore. It's Chinese students who are going to Australia to study. And that's a big thing because Chinese students in the United States spent about 90 billion US dollars a year go in tuition fees, buying real estate. Now, the number of Chinese, and this was in 2024, the number of Chinese going to the U.S. has dropped about 20%. And so they want to be going to Australia. Yet at the same time, you have a lot of Australian politicians who want to build up AUKUS, who want to be part of Quad and sort of be part of the United States, NATO, and Western Europe's sort of curtain in containing China. I will say, though, George, that relations between Australia and China have gotten markedly better in the last couple of years under the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and under Penny Wong, the foreign minister. They did a much better job than the previous Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, or ScoMo, who Chinese view as a complete bigot. I mean, he used to denigrate Chinese value system. So to Albanese's credit, he said, we will disagree with China, but we will respectfully disagree and try to come to some accommodation. So the current PM is better than the previous bunch. You know, you saw Malcolm Turnbull, Tony Abbott, and ScoMo was the worst. These were all xenophobes. So Albanese is trying to hold that in. But you're right. There are a lot of politicians in Australia who take an ideological, I would say, bigoted, maybe even racist view of China. And I think that's underscoring a lot of what's happening, not just in Australia, but also Europe. I think a lot of these nations don't like that a non-predominantly white nation is emerging strong and powerful. Now, let's give an example. Just last week, the Deputy Secretary of State for the United States, Lando, he gave a speech where he said the U.S. is not going to make the same mistake with India that it made with China. It's not going to allow India to get strong powerfully with advanced technology and with major manufacturing. Now, if you were Modi, he should be criticizing this, but he's been silent. It doesn't make any sense to me. And a lot of your viewers are in the global south or the global majority. If you're a citizen in one of these nations, you should be angry that the United States is saying no other country, especially a brown, a black, or a yellow country, can rise and rival us technologically or in power. We always have to be at the top of the totem pole. That's imperialism. That is basically like colonialism. You know, this is like they're acting as if it's the 19th century. It's something that I'm shocked that Modi, he seems to be a really weak man, is not stepping up and saying, this is not right. Why is the United States saying they want to contain us the same way that they are trying to contain China and failing, but the way that they succeeded in containing Japan in the 1980s with the Plaza Accords? It just doesn't make any sense right now. But race and ideological bigotry is coursing through the capitals of far too many countries, George.